Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. And our Buffalo Wings, who are going for a three-peat here in the 2046 season, got the season off to a good start with a 7-3 victory over the Pirates on opening day. The bad news, though, is that we lost our ace, Jim Lance, to a bicep strain. He was pitching pretty well, 3 2/3 innings with 8 strikeouts, only 2 hits. But he had that bicep strain, which he suffered on his final pitch of the day, which he did give up for a home run as well. So unfortunately, we'll be without our ace, who we feel was cheated out of the NL Cy Young Award last year, and we'll be without him for about 6 weeks. So certainly unlikely that he'll be able to win a Cy Young Award, missing at least a month and a half of the season. And 28 years old, although he's in an excellent career, he's still never been named to an All-Star team. And hard to imagine he's going to make the All-Star team either this year, missing all of April and likely a good chunk of May. So we have made a move to replace him. We moved Chris Lott into the rotation, and we called up Joey Bills from AAA. It was one of our final cuts this year. Our pitching staff is so deep that he could be a major leaguer on probably 31 of the 32 teams in baseball coming out of spring training. Unfortunately, on ours, he didn't make the 26-man. But we'll give the former 6th-round draft pick, who's become the number 38 prospect in baseball, a chance to see what he can do working out of the bullpen over the next month and a half or so. So good to see what Bills can do at the major league level. Also just wanted to briefly comment on something that was brought up by DLL first baseman 14 and YME 943, suggesting that we move the impressive young rookie outfielder who started off his career today going 3 for 5 with 2 runs scored, a triple, and a homer. Suggested that we move him to center field over our now longtime center fielder, Mr. Velasco. I think those guys were both remembering that Casares had 70 range a year ago, but according to our latest scouting report, he's down to 65 outfield range with a below average error rating and a slightly above average arm. Looking at Velasco right now, he's got the same range, much better error rating, and a slightly weaker arm. And Velasco, of course, at this time is not only a 3-time World Series champion, but also a 3-time World Series MVP. So as great as we think Casares is going to be, we are not going to push our starting center fielder out quite yet for a rookie who needs to pay some of his dues. If Casares does end up looking more like he's got 70 range going forward, it's certainly something that we'll think about. But for the time being, we're taking the advice from DLL and YME943 under advisement, and we're switching Casares to play center field for us against left-handed pitching and shifting Velasco to left field against them, given that his arm is the weakest of our core outfielders. So we'll give Casares a little more playing time in center field. We'll continue to get updated scouting reports on these guys. If something changes, maybe we make a move for the long term. But for the time being, Velasco is our center fielder, leadoff hitter, and Casares, as great as that first regular season major league game was, is still a rookie who needs to earn his stripes. And 3 games into the season, and our number 1 and now number 2 pitchers are both on the injured list. Harlan Campeau, who we signed as a free agent this offseason, coming off of an injury-plagued year with the Dodgers. Didn't even make it through 1 start, 2 1/3 innings pitched, 2 hits allowed, 2 walks. One of the hits was a home run. So a rough first outing for him. and he's going to be out for 4 to 5 weeks with bone chips in his elbow. So we're thinking that this team could be the best squad that we've ever put together in this playthrough, but it is certainly not optimal to lose our number 1 and number 2 starters, both for over a month on April 5th of the season. Still would expect that we're a strong playoff team. We do have plenty of good pitchers in AAA. It'll actually give us an opportunity to give another guy who probably should be in the majors some major league action for the next month. But certainly the early part of this season is not going the way that we scripted it this past off season. And when life gives you lemons, you try to make lemonade. So Joey Bills, who we just brought up, really has the profile to be a starter. We're going to slide him into a starting role for us as our 5th starter. And to replace him in the rotation, we brought up another youngster, Ari Caper, 4th-round pick from 2040. Was 12-10 with a 4.53 ERA last year in AAA Albany. Its control is potentially a bit of an issue, but particularly as a reliever, I think he could be pretty interesting for us to see what he can do. And we also promoted the lunk-headed RE to the majors today on his 24th birthday. So happy birthday, RE Caper. Don't let us down. And despite the injuries to the top 2 pitchers on our team, 6-1 record after the first week of the season. A couple of familiar names, players of the week in the AL, our former first baseman Daniel Rojas, who we let move on a year ago, 4 home runs and 12 ribbies the first week of the season for the Mariners. Fortunately for us, the guy who replaced him as our first baseman, Jim Reichert, may have been even better. The 25-year-old hopefully going to have his first full year in the majors now after injury issues last year. 5 homers, 11 ribbies, and a 4.33 average over the first week of the season. And a week into the season, we are 10-3 despite getting crushed by the Orioles 9-3 last time out. Selling out every game, even though we upped our ticket prices a bit, so we'll up them another little notch. Fan interest still at extreme levels. Fan loyalty is extreme. We've turned this market into an above-average major league market, even though it was well below average when we started off this playthrough over 20 years ago. And hopefully we can generate a little money, because right now the fans in Buffalo are pretty excited to see the 2-time defending champions playing at home. And the Wings are just steamrolling through Major League Baseball, off to a 16-3 start. But another injury to a top player, Jim Reichert, who we were just talking about, player of the week the first week of the season, hitting over 400 with 8 homers and 19 ribbies here on April 22nd. Suffered a concussion that's going to have a moderate impact on everything for the next 2 weeks. They claim he's day-to-day and we can play him. We're not going to mess around with a concussion, though, and we are going to put Reichert right onto the injured list, give him as much time as he needs to get straight. Certainly not cool that arguably 3 of the top 4 or 5 players on our team are now out with injuries, but hopefully it's nothing too serious, and by this time, the 22nd of May, a month from now, we'll have all 3 back and completely healthy. And in the embarrassment of riches that our farm system has come with 3 of the top 10 prospects in baseball, Juan Toledo, the number 5 prospect in baseball, who has been a guy that we have been watching over the years, started the year in AAA mainly because our team is so stacked, and he's hitting 400 in AAA with 7 homers and 25 ribbies and 60 at-bats. He does look at this point, and we've been playing him at first base just to get him as versatile as possible defensively. But he's also got respectable outfield ratings as well. He's a guy who was an international free agent signing in 2039, so over 7 years ago at this point. He had some brutal years in the minors with insane numbers of strikeouts. That's still his issue, but the rest of his development is coming along pretty well. He does look like he could very well end up just being a platoon guy in the majors. The left-handed hitter looks like an absolute force against right-handed pitching, but still struggles with lefties. He does still have some growth that we think can take place, but we're going to bring him up to the majors to replace Reichert for the next couple weeks, play him against right-handed pitching so he gets some pretty regular at-bats in the majors. Probably will have to send him down once Reichert comes back. We don't have a ton of guys with option years left at this point, and Toledo still does have one at this point. So unless he's completely dominant, he still may end up spending the whole year in AAA, where we don't mind playing him against left-handed pitching and giving him a little more playing time. But right now, with Reichert out, we are going to see what Mr. Toledo can do during his major league debut as well. And our Buffalo Wings struggled a bit for us in the final week and a half of April, but still finished the month with a 19-7 record. So we've got a 2-game lead on the Atlanta Braves in the NL East. We're actually at this point trailing both the Reds and the Tigers for the best record in baseball. But it's very early going. You can see Reichert, despite being on the IL, still leading the league with a 4.03 average. Rookie Casares leading the league with 12 homers. Casares and Porter tied for the league lead in ribbies. Reichert and Casares first and second in OPS. Casares, the rookie, leading the league in batter war. Pitching-wise, surprisingly, kind of a big contrast to last season and previous seasons. Don't have anyone on the pitching leaderboards, which is a unique spot for us. Looking at the team statistics, the offense has been absolutely incredible. First in the National League in every hitting category, except for strikeouts, where we rank second. The pitching has been surprisingly bad. Our starters' ERA is 12th, bullpen ERA is 7th, and we're 8th in the league in runs allowed. I think we've probably gotten a little bit unlucky, and certainly losing our first and second starters is not positive as far as what you'd expect from the pitching staff. We have gotten a little lucky in the standings as well. We're 2 games above Pythagorean expectations. 4-1 record in 1-run games probably explains part of that. Campo is looking close to coming back. Reichert with the concussions, hopefully close to coming back too. And Lance still looks like he might be a week or 2 away. In their absence, Arturo Casares was not just the National League Rookie of the Month. He was also named the top hitter in the National League after batting .342 to go along with those 12 homers that we talked about, 26 ribbies and 27 runs scored. So we'll see if Mr. Casares can potentially make history by winning not just Rookie of the Year, but we're going to say it, MVP is a rookie this year as well. And who knows, if Casares plays a little better defensively, maybe we'll even give him the job in center field over Velasco at some point. And with Harlan Campo ready to come back from the IL, we've made a minor trade here. We traded away the Rule 5 acquisition from this past year for a minor league catcher. Lizardo Savonarola, who had not pitched particularly great for us, but love his personality, love that he's an Iron Man, really like his pitching profile. But he's almost 31 years old and he's got no option years. So we decided to keep, for the time being, the youngsters that we brought up on the major league team. So we traded away Savonarola. We got 23-year-old catcher John Metzler in return. Looks like, he could be a 4A catcher for us. Good personality, a bat that's decent. He's durable, just not as good defensively as I like, even for a backup catcher. So kind of figure with the fact that he's got 2 option years left, a guy that will likely stash at AAA the next couple seasons, could see some use on the major league team if we have some injuries. And he does give us a little optionality around Juan Ramirez. We still have Banks in the minors right now, too, because we've got a Rule 5 catcher on the major league roster. So between having Banks as well as Metzler and, of course, Medina in the organization now, who's hitting 273 and 22 at-bats, we do have some options if we need to move on from Juan Ramirez. Don't know that I want to, but he's probably going to be making over $8 million next year. Love his defense, but he's hitting 216 again this year, which is kind of what he does. Thought that the bat might be a little bit better. He is still drawing walks, but with the money that he's going to be getting paid next year, maybe we move on from him at some point. But that's certainly not on the top of our list to think about now. But we do have a little more optionality in our system with the relievers. With the move that we made, Bills has not been great in the rotation, 4.61 ERA, although he has won a couple of games. Barajas, our longtime ace, off to a rough start this year. So we're going to move Bills into a long relief role and set him up as our emergency starter. Caper has been really good with a 1.46 ERA over 12 and a third innings. And we'll put Campo back atop the rotation until Mr. Lance is ready to rejoin the team. And Reichert, now back from his concussion issues, looks completely healthy. So that meant that we sent Toledo back down to AAA. He did hit 308 with a homer in his first 26 major league at-bats. But still think he's got some development that may happen a little better at AAA, where we'll, as I said, also be playing him against left-handed pitching. I think conceivably, if we do end up back in the playoffs, and certainly is a team that's been in the playoffs 18 straight years, looking for a three-peat with a 22-8 record on May 5th, would expect that we will be back in the playoffs and think that Toledo could play a similar role to Casares a year ago, a guy who wasn't on the 26-man roster for any of the year in Casares' case, or for most of the year potentially in Toledo's case, still could make the 26-man playoff roster when we go to 12 pitchers rather than 13, and see what see if maybe he can have impact like Casares did in the playoffs a year ago when Casares was the NLCS MVP. Certainly do have potential in the coming weeks and months to think about maybe moving on from a Jabari Habersham or a Josh Porter or a Tim Boston. We're going to need to open up a long-term spot for Toledo. And keep in mind, we still also have Daniel Aguayo-Leal, who we purchased from the independent leagues after we failed to sign him as an international free agent a couple of years ago. He's hitting 351 with 10 homers and 97 ribbies for Albany. So still absolute embarrassment of riches for us down in AAA. We're going to need to maybe get rid of some of these higher paid players. Porter, I'm looking at you going forward. And those of you who have eagle eyes would note that Bobby Bolig is back in our minor league system. We signed him to a minor league contract right at the end of spring training when he didn't have a job. So still have him for organizational depth. Was at one point one of the top hitters in our lineup, but has become a bit of a OOTP vagabond the last few years, primarily playing in the minor leagues. And although we've had good news with Campo and Reichert returning to health, the recovery for Jim Lance is unclear, still suffering from that strained biceps and uncertain when he's going to be back. So we can't complain about the way we're performing with a winning percentage of over 700 despite these injuries. Hopefully we'll have Lance back before the end of the month of May. He's been out longer than either of those other guys, so he's certainly going to merit a rehab assignment, probably maybe a start or two in AAA before we'll even bring him back. So again, if we see him before the end of May at this point, probably would consider that a victory. And here on May 27th, ready to bring Jim Lance back. He did get healthy, and we've had him pitch a couple of games in AAA Albany. Had him on pitch counts, so he hasn't pitched a ton. But and he wasn't great with a 7.4 ERA over 7 2/3 innings. But had him on a 50 pitch count his first game, 80 his second game. So he's pitched twice in AAA now. And we are going to bring him back to the major leagues, which is going to necessitate a difficult decision. Not as difficult as it could be because Luis Palencia got banged up a couple of weeks ago. You can see he's healthy now. It wasn't a long-term injury, still his 5 games on the IL. So even though we moved on from Savonarola, the injury to Palencia let us bring up Danny Kashuk, the left-hander who we picked up in a trade with Milwaukee right before the season started. Traded away Mike Roberts, a guy who had come up through our system but who was out of option years, and we didn't want to risk waiving and DFAing him. He's done a really nice job for Milwaukee. But Kashuk is a young left-hander with some options, is someone we think has a little bit of potential. He's done okay for us now. Don't love some of his personality traits, but he's still a lefty with some talent. So we've got a difficult decision to make. Kind of would prefer to have 3 lefties in the bullpen. Kevin Hale hasn't been great this year, but he's out of options, so we're going to continue to give him some time to work through things. So because Caper has pitched better than Bills, we're actually going to send Bills back down to AAA. Really just caught in a numbers game at this point. He hasn't been bad at all at the major league level, but we need a spot on the team. So Bills is going to go back down to AAA Albany. Lott is going to move back into the bullpen. Coles, the rookie Black, who's 5-2 with a 3.25 ERA. Barajas and Campo will all be demoted 1 notch. And Jim Lance will be back as our number 1 starter. And we've made it to June 1st, and for a second consecutive month, we have the National League Rookie of the Month. Was not Mr. Casares this time around, though. It was Danny Black, the rookie pitcher, 3-1 with a 2.08 ERA. He continues to have a really nice rookie season for us, 5-2 through the first 2 months of the season with a 3.08 ERA. 1.2 WAR for the former first-round draft pick, who's viewed as the number 10 prospect in baseball right now. Taking a look at the standings here, have extended our lead to 4.5 games in the NL East, and our .667 winning percentage, although not as high as it was at the end of May, is now the best record in baseball, 36-18 record. The Braves, 4.5 behind us in the division, are also closest to us for best record in the National League. The Tigers at 34-19 are a game and a half behind us for the best record in baseball. Taking a look at the leaders, Riker second in batting, Quesada is the rookie, third in homers, tied for the league lead in ribbies. Riker second in the league in OPS. Pitching wise, still don't have anybody on the leaderboard. Taking a look at more detailed team stats, 36 and 18 record is now a bit below Pythagorean expectations. Continue to be the number one offensive team in the National League in every category except for strikeouts, where we're fourth. And the pitching has really turned around over the past month. Now ranked tied for third in the National League with runs allowed. Starters with the fourth best ERA. Bullpen with the second best. We're in the top half of every pitching category at this point. Not quite as dominant a pitching staff as we have had in previous seasons, but we've only gotten 9 games between Lance and Campo so far, only 3 wins between them. You can see Lance's first game at the major league level after his return was not exceptional. He got hit pretty hard, actually. Think he's still working off a little bit of the rust, but happy to see him doing it at the major league level, and hopefully he will get himself straightened out in relatively short order. And our Buffalo Wings continue to play some pretty incredible baseball in this 2046 season. As we sit here on the first day of summer, get ready for the first year player draft, 50 and 22 record, 7.5 games above now the Marlins in the National League East. And we are 6 games up on the Reds for the best record in the National League and the best record in baseball. The rookie Casares continues to lead the National League in runs batted in, although the batting average has dipped to 269. Our other prime rookie, Danny Black, is now third in the National League with 8 wins, 8-2 record with a 3 ERA. So a couple of excellent rookies performing at a very high level for us. And we've got a lot of other pretty solid ones on the Major League roster as well, with the likes of Caper and Kashuk, as well as our everyday players, Juan Palomo getting some action. And as I talked about, there's some pretty interesting players in AAA as well. So going to have some interesting roster decisions to make, just given the massive level of talent we have on this team. But before we worry about that, we are going to focus on the first year player draft. And we will not be picking until 40th overall, had the best record in baseball last year, and of course won the World Series, and there's a fair number of compensatory picks. So we won't be going till number 40. There's some pretty highly rated prospects out there. You can see there's a bunch of 5-star prospects according to our scout, one of whom Juan Meza, a 21-year-old out of UNC Charlotte, pretty much just about ready to be a pretty impactful power hitter already at the major league level with some good personality traits. Don't expect to see him around, but we are going to go ahead and get the draft going and take a look at the players who we will have a choice of picking number 40 overall before we finish up this episode. So auto drafting into our pick and looking at the position players. All of the 4-star and higher position players are gone now. There's 4 3.5-star players available. Eddie Bahaman, second baseman. Doesn't really look like much of a defensive infielder, but not a bad bat for an infielder. He could play corner outfield if you needed him to. He's a switch hitter, which is nice. Just don't know where I'd really be thrilled to play him defensively, and I don't think the bat is special enough to really make up for his defensive limitations as an infielder. Hopefully we'll find someone more interesting than him. Amare Hankton, a center fielder, Solid outfield range, a nice arm, can play all the outfield positions plus first base. A decent bat, but nothing particularly special. Gene Marone, a left fielder, college player out of Clark. I believe that's in Massachusetts. Durable, pretty good base running and stealing instincts, although he's not particularly fast. Competent defensive outfielder. Whatever he gets to, he's going to handle pretty well. Another guy that may be a slightly above average bat, but not particularly exciting. And then Tony Van Horn, 18-year-old center fielder, really good speed, pretty interesting defensively with that 65 range, and a pretty interesting bat. Not going to draw a lot of walks, but he does have potential to be a pretty interesting player. Has some pretty negative personality traits. 18-year-old left-hander. I think on first glance, I probably like Van Horn the best of these four guys. I'll spend time on these 3-star prospects going forward. I'll flash the batting potential up here of some of these top guys available for those of you who are interested in seeing that. And I'll be digging into some of these players going forward in more detail offline. But there are a decent number of 3-star hitting prospects out there as well, according to our scout, some of whom look like they've got pretty well-balanced profiles that could be interesting for me to think about. But before I do that offline, I want to at least take a look at the top pitchers available as well. Those of you who have followed me knows there's a reasonably good chance if there's a decent pitcher available, this is the area that we could end up going. Looks like a couple of relievers and a starter are the highest rated, a couple of college relievers actually. Joe Best out of Hendrix College. Control is a question, but his stuff and his movement, as well as his slider and his sinker, are already major league quality or above. Poor competition level at Hendrix, which looks like it's in Conway, Arkansas. Don't think I'd take him in the first round. Little worried about that control at 22 years old. Still doesn't really know where the ball is going, but some insane strikeout numbers for him at Hendrix. Dan Lynch coming out of UT Martin. Another guy, control is the potential issue. Incredible fastball, still working on the changeup. I don't want him to end up being just a one-pitch guy. His stuff and his movement could both be really good. Not tempted by either of those guys in the first round, so we'll cross our fingers here before we look at Mike Chapman and hope that maybe he may be the direction that will go. Looks like a profile to at least consider. He's got a 3-pitch arsenal already of a fastball, a forkball, and a sinker. They think his curveball could be his best pitch. Hasn't really developed yet. If that curve develops, though, his stuff could be off the charts. Average movement and average control, that's not typically a combination I'd go for. Like people in my pitching staff to kind of be above average everywhere, being a pitching snob. But if there's a guy who you can kindly get away with average movement and average control with, it's a guy who we think his stuff could be 75 out of 80. So interesting prospect there, has good stamina. Not a perfect prospect, but again, we're picking 40th in the draft. Beggars can't be choosers here. We'll throw up the pitching potential and a few of the other top players for all of you to take a look at. Some starters here might be a little more well balanced to think about. Geo Feature here, a left-handed starter, pretty well balanced, going to be reliant on that curve developing to become a real impact player at the major league level. Alan Kitchen, if he really has a third pitch, could be interesting. He's fragile physically. And he's basically a two-pitch guy right now with the fastball and the sinker, hoping that that knuckle curve develops because you don't think that changeup's going to be much of anything. But if he develops to his full potential, he is a pretty high-end pitcher. May end up being more of a bullpen guy when all is said and done. And if he does, I just don't love the fact that he doesn't have a world-class pitch, but still someone that even if we don't look at in the first round, maybe someone to consider down the line. And then Elvis Webb, going to be somewhat dependent on a third, and then if you would hope a fourth or a fifth pitch developing out of that curve, the change up in the knuckle curve. But looks like he could be a guy who could have a pretty well-balanced pitching profile, plus stamina, plus at holding runners from Western New York, although he's committed to UC Santa Barbara. So there's some interesting pitchers out there. I'm going to spend much more time offline going through them, so it's conceivable we may end up picking someone who we haven't even really talked about at this point. But if you've got thoughts on which direction we should go, always helpful for me to hear those in the comment section. There's been some injuries this year. Certainly hasn't been a perfect season, but 72 games into the year, we have the best record in all of baseball, and the injury situation is really not a problem. We ended up putting Palencia on a rehab assignment just because we didn't really have a spot for him on the major league team. We've still got another 10 days for him to be down there, so we'll have to make a decision in the beginning of July. Likely we'll bring him back, but wanted to ensure that we could continue to see what Caper could do, and he's put up a 1.08 ERA, as well as what the youngster Kashuk could do, and he still hasn't allowed a run to score in 5 games. So it's going to be a tough decision for us when we get to the point where we've got to decide what to do with Palencia. We'll be doing our mid-season review when we get to the 80-game mark in the next episode, which is only, about the time that we're going to be needed to make a decision on Palencia. And as I mentioned, with the fact that we've got such good young talent, particularly in the case of Juan Toledo sitting down in AAA, do we look to maybe move on from a Tim Boston, see what we can get from him in trade? It's certainly hard to argue that Toledo is not a better player than Boston at this point. Boston hitting .266, only 5 homers this year through 203 at-bats, been below average offensively. Still has the ratings to be a pretty good hitter against right-handed pitching, which is the only pitching he regularly starts against. But could consider moving on from him to open up a roster spot. And then at some point with the youth that we have, we'll likely be looking to move on from Josh Porter, who's making some good money. He's having a really nice year, .295 average, 21 doubles, 12 homers, 12 stolen bases, 149 WRC plus. He's got some speed. He's solid defensively, given that we're a win-now team. I don't think we trade him away, but if there's a market for Tim Boston to open up a spot for the likes of Juan Toledo, probably something we should be thinking about. Boston's still making the major league minimum at this point. Not going to be a crippling amount of around $3 million next year, but I don't think he is a long-term guy on our team at this point, which is kind of crazy because when we picked up him in that trade less than 3 years ago, was really excited about it. He's won a Silver Slugger for us already and been a pretty productive offensive player over the years, but the talent that we've got in our farm system right now makes a guy like Boston struggle to keep a roster spot on our team, which is kind of crazy, but it's a good position for us to be in. The goal is to get to the three-peat, and if sacrificing a player or two who were really important to us 2 or 3 years ago to get to that world championship is what we need to do, then we'll certainly think about making those difficult decisions in the coming episodes. Just to give you something to chew on if you're still watching, we'll shop Boston around at this point. I'm not guessing there's going to be any incredible offers for him, but you never know. It looks like there's a decent amount of demand. I'll have to spend some time kind of going through this list. Looks like mostly major league guys, some decent players making some good money. The rest guys that are probably going to struggle to make our 26-man roster. No superstars. I guess the other option is to just shop him for prospects and see if there's anything that interesting that comes up on that search. Looks more like moderate prospects. Chris Keller, a pretty meh first base prospect. Couple more, at least according to our scout, highly regarded prospects here from the Yankees. Josh Nembard, though, is still kind of a meh third baseman overall. Dave Bartkowski. Interesting hitting profile with that great gap power and that great speed, positive personality. Former second-round pick, does have 3 options yet. We're so deep in the outfield. Hard to imagine that Bartkowski would ever end up being a big-time contributor for us. Chris Bortz is young, 19 years old, good personality traits, third-round pick. Really kind of looks more like a utility infielder and not quite the glove we would typically want from a utility infielder, given that in addition to being pitching snobs, we've become a bit of defense snobs in recent years. And we've tried to be defense snobs throughout the playthrough with varying degrees of success. So not a ton of demand for Boston, but we're going to need to find a spot for Mr. Toledo very soon, because he is just wrecking AAA pitching. 337 average, 25 homers, and 69 ribbies through just 205 at-bats. So there's really nothing left for him to prove at that level. Still has a little development to go, including avoid strikeouts. So since I'm willing to play him against lefties in AAA, and we are 50-22, I don't feel any incredible urgency to get the clock on his service time running any quicker than it already is. But clearly he will be an upgrade for Mr. Boston if and when we make a deal. So I think Mr. Boston's days with the Buffalo Wings are probably numbered at this point, and can't imagine, unless we have some injury issues, that we won't be making the Toledo for Boston spot before the end of the month of July. But those decisions will not need to be made until our next episode, or perhaps the episode after that. Right now we got the best record in baseball. We're still selling out every game, so we'll crank our ticket prices up another quarter and get ready to see who we add to this strong farm system in the upcoming draft in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.